Miha Krall, quick rapid fire for you. Favorite book?
That would be Enshittification by Cory Doctorow, very much explaining how modern IT is initially launched as fantastic and then gets worse and worse and worse to extract more capital out from it.
Terrifying, but I like it. Favorite podcast?
Well, that is going to be kind of obvious because I'm covering Microsoft domain, but Kevin Scott, CTO of Microsoft, has a fantastic podcast called Behind the Tech. And he has some amazing guests and discusses the future of IT, the way how Kevin himself sees it.
And you got a big job, you got a crazy job. How do you unwind?
Well, I live in Pacific Northwest, which means that I'm out a lot, climbing up one of our 6 volcanoes that we have. I have my own forest that needs lots of caring of. So the outdoors activities, either with an axe or with the walking shoes, is probably the best way how I do it.
Amazing. I love that. All that and more on Transformers. What is transformation and who are the people leading the way? Join me as I talk to my fellow nerds about everything transformation, everything moving crazy fast in this industry, and everything on the horizon to come. My name is Anne Fanai. I am CIO and Vice President of Business Platform Transformation at IBM, and this is Transformers, a Think podcast. Miha Krall, thank you so much for joining me today on Transformers.
Oh, such a pleasure. Very good to talk to you.
So I wanted to dive right in. You have a very unique title and a very unique job. So you're one of the few guests we've had on here that are actual IBM employees. And I want to look here at make sure I get it right. You are the Chief Technology Officer for IBM Consulting's Microsoft practice. So tell me a little bit about what that means.
Well, in most of the system integration companies, you have many CTOs. It's not just like when you have a typical enterprise that title would be reserved for a single person. So yes, within IBM Consulting, we do have a very strong strategic partnership with Microsoft. And as part of that, somebody needs to be responsible for technical direction, prioritization. Are we going to build solutions with Copilot? What are we going to do with Microsoft security and so on? And more or less, that's my job. Title sounds very lofty, but my job is partially client-facing and kind of a lead technical excellence and strategy when it comes, what can we do for our clients with Microsoft stack and technology? And part of that is internal, which is enablement, technology prioritization and selection. How do we use IBM technology that fits on top of Microsoft stack that would fit in my portfolio as well?
Yeah. And with your background, you have spent time in other companies besides IBM. And obviously this role requires you to be a Microsoft expert. So, throughout your history, have you seen a change recently or over the entirety on how partnerships are actually handled and how they're worked through today?
Yes, there is a change, but it's not the first change if you're looking through the history of all of the technology vendors, but also history of system integrators. I am a returner back to IBM. My first job right after college was with IBM, and that is kind of 30 years ago. I was an OS2 technician and Lotus Notes after it was acquired. Then I spent 15 years in Microsoft on 3 different continents. That very much brought me to Redmond, where I live now. After that, I was in AWS, then went to Accenture, then went to EPAM, which is one of the largest product engineering companies, and came back to IBM, where I'm here now for about 2 years. So your question is actually really good because particularly in my 15 years of Microsoft career, seeing through different swings how important partners are. Can a cloud provider, and at that time Microsoft was not yet cloud provider, but can they do everything on their own or should everything depend on strategic partners? This is actually swinging back and forth, I would say, almost every decade. It goes from one extreme, which is we will build our own professional services, our own thought leadership, and, burn the ships and all of that. And then you go to the other extreme, which is we should not do any implementation on our own. Everything should be done by system integration partners. Right now, I would say we are in that part of the swing where Microsoft, actually every large technology vendor, everyone that is investing into AI, heavily depends on last mile implementers, which would be IBM Consulting, for example. They do not want to do the last mile. There's so much work and investment to do for a platform and majority of the modern tech stack that the last mile is now almost exclusively reserved for companies like us that are doing system integration.
So one thing with your perspective, both seeing inside of Microsoft as key to that partnership, inside of IBM, the SI perspective that you brought up, there's this word fast. Everyone's got pressure to move faster. I think we're saying AI is allowing us to move faster. What is your take on, is fast a real thing yet? Is fast a dangerous thing? Like where would you fall on your thoughts around all this? Fast is this word that everyone has to manage through.
I don't think that I'm going to tell you is it good or bad, but I definitely want to give you a couple of examples how neck-breaking fast speed it is. I think that this is the first time historically in IT history that young generation has very little to learn from the previous old seniors. We are seeing now that, for example, new coders, TikTok generation that starts to work in a workforce and they fully embrace all of the modern AI tools that they were born with YouTube and Gmail and AI and they don't even know how life without ChatGPT or whatever they use, and they produce better results faster than any of those elders or seniors that should transfer the knowledge over to them. So that gap that the new generation can't learn from the old generation. The only reason that that happens is that the old generation was not able to rotate and absorb, which shows you that if that speed and acceleration continues, it's a very big risk. How are we going to do that talent continuity? Very much what is the new definition of a senior IT person as opposed to the junior or the new one? And just because of speed of changes and innovation.
Yeah, and I know one of the conversations I've been having is, it's really the entry level skill is what's changing, right? So I think my dad started out fixing typewriters in 1968 or something like that, and say 67 or 68 actually, and he was very technical by the terminology of that time. It was a mechanical technical, but he never learned to code. So, he had to pivot his career because he didn't want to go into a coding realm as he hit his mid-career and became in more administrative jobs by the end of his career. But it's there, I think there's a little bit of a tie and analogy there. Like for us as Gen X contemporaries, right? Like we've seen the change in a lot of technology. We're keeping up with it, but I can see just, a lot of just a hair ahead of us. It's like, oh crap,
Yep.
what the heck is going on here? Yeah.
And we did learn to adapt. I mean, both you and I, we went through several waves of, physical hosting to virtualization to containerization to, keep going on all of those major changes. We always did adapt. It's not the problem, can Gen X adapt? The problem is that let me put it this way, Anne. We know exactly how these things work. We are actually the most technical generation. I'm fixing IT not just for my parents, I need to fix IT for my kids because they don't care anymore about all of the details that are below their line of caring or line of visibility. And that new generation is actually much better in using those modern tools, but much worse in understanding how they work. Is that better or worse? It definitely makes us, the Gen X, much more slower and cautious. And we went through so many different problems and risks that were realized. That new young generation is very happily embracing and absorbing all of this new tech.
Again, it's that rebaselining. Like I think, you know, mechanically, you know how a car works, and a modern mechanic is very different today. Like we built the pipes, I'd say, you know, kind of probably the younger baby boom, Gen Xers, elder millennials. We built the pipes of everything that is the AI today.
And we know how it works. A very good test of seniority, I guess, is I'm asking during interview loops, explain how TCP/IP protocol works.
Oh
And
gosh,
I
you're
would
giving me a
say,
flashback.
but young
Yeah.
generation, not just that they don't know, they're not even embarrassed that they don't know. They don't need that knowledge. It's like, like who cares? And when it comes to, let's say, hands-on skills, here is a good example. Are we rotating fast enough or not? I was talking to a startup not that far back. When they are hiring people, instead of, just a few years ago, if you went into a coding assignment and hiring, interviewing, and all of that, and you got asked a whole bunch of technical questions, if they found you that you are cheating with GitHub Copilot, of course, you are immediately dismissed, and this is horrible, right? Now, literally, the particularly startups, all of the interviews are show me which digital assistant tool are you using to solve problems. We don't want you to use pen and paper or chisel and stone or whatever you used to do before AI. Are we also, now I'm asking every enterprise, are we also rotating to expect that those modern tools are already that employees are already proficient in those modern tools, or do we see them as cheating, and if you use them during interview you're going to be dismissed?
That is such a good point because I mean, I think one really fine point to drive home is like this is not a bad thing. This pivot, like this is a very good thing, and I think the continuous learning is certainly important, if especially if you're in the tech industry, and I think you know one of the interesting changes you called out startups, and I know that's an expectation. Right? I like you have got contacts out there, know folks that work them there, but what's your I feel like enterprise, it still has the little bit of that cheating notion stuck in their head, right? Like, I'm afraid to let it do anything more than improve my email or, do a little, help me with a search I can't quite get the right answer on or can't find the answer on. I feel like there might be still a little reluctance in larger
A
enterprises.
lot of reluctance. So enterprises are just much, glacial speed when it comes to adopting any of those technologies, and it's always scared, the fear of what could go wrong, right? Particularly looking at AI, initial probably couple of years were all about, do we have the right governance in place? Do we have the right controls in place? Did we lock everything down and maybe just allow a little tiny little sliver for a small little group to try it out, in that fear what could go wrong, as opposed to companies that try to be on a forefront where they are trying to, run fast, break things, learn from them, maybe do them a little bit in isolation instead of on a core. But the whole approach is completely different than a typical traditional enterprise would do.
And I think there's a little more tolerance for well thought out breaking of things, right? Like before it would be like there's a slowdown or a piece of a problem and be like, we're gonna call people on the carpet. This thing, like, we were talking about like some of the sales tools. Like if there's a break, it's like, who am I gonna kill? It's like, well, no, there's kind of an acceptance of like this just happens, and the price of speed, the price of continuing to move forward is like that little like you're going to get a glitch every once in a while. And the smart piece is, okay, well, my sales system can't have a problem at close a quarter, but if I'm going to experiment, I would want to do it like at the lighter times in a sales cycle.
True, historically, what you said, but now the systems, which also you manage, systems became way more resilient on their own as well, and they can actually sustain small glitches in production very frequently. So instead of kind of trying to have only highly specific outage windows and highly isolated environments and all of that, we can get closer and closer and closer to do experimentation in production, not on a sales system, but systems that are maybe one step below on a business classification. Lots of them are resilient enough to detect the problem, avoid the problem, maybe even self-heal. And that's very much one of the things that kind of it's a very nice virtuous cycle that the system architecture is becoming way more resilient and therefore building new things, making dreams come true. That's very much what software development is, can be so much faster and doesn't need to be planned like mission to Mars where you cannot fail at all, right?
Absolutely spot on. I like the way you kind of added that nuance of like one layer down. And I think that that's important, especially like, your ERP system or, your accounting system. Certainly you're not living in that
Yeah,
world, but
mission critical systems still needs
yeah,
to have
like
their own.
that's
Yes,
still like that's still every CIO's nightmare is the mission critical system for sure. But
correct.
it's the expectation of okay, we don't have to think explicitly about disaster recovery, failover. It's an expectation now, and I think that's actually a little bit liberating, a little bit freeing, right? It's like, well, if I mess this up, hopefully the most I see is maybe a little slowdown. I can recover, and everything
Yeah.
goes back to
And
normal,
lose
right?
maybe a couple of minutes of data instead of losing a couple of weeks of data. Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And along those same lines, again, with this, again, given the very unique spot you sit in, are you seeing, I'll say, any set of trends that smarter businesses are doing? Like, is like the smartest businesses you see out there? Is there anything really specific you see them honing in on and doing?
Yeah, particularly with the AI space, there are probably two trends worth observing and discussing. The first trend is AI is no longer a human augmentation tool, and the businesses that are on a forefront start to use agents, agentic AI, as a fully independent tools that can get tasks execute all the way to the finish line and then ask for human approval. And particularly if you're looking in a software development lifecycle, full testing battery, documentation writing, maybe, a simple PR, simple pull request fix can now suddenly be delegated to AI agent on a server side. It's no longer, for lots of people, AI just means a nice chat interface within Visual Studio or within Outlook or within, something like that. Agents are dramatically changing that approach. Now, digital workers, digital agents actually become fully fledged members of teams. So you can easily see that in the progressive companies where their team composition is, I have 3 humans and 27 agents. That is my team, which is very different way of thinking that we have now humans and machines treated together, that they're going to jointly work on a task. So that's one part. But the other part is that the whole notion what AI can do is very interesting to see that it's AI component agents are starting to replace things that we used to do traditional. Let's say if somebody wants to make a new microservice, you don't need to create a traditional procedural microservice anymore. You can replace it with the very much agent that is going to do the non-deterministic decisioning and everything the way how AI works, and it just magically works. Instead of 20 pages of if then else statements, you just let AI make the same decision, but it is in two prompts. It's very different approach, the way how I see that, how progressive enterprises embrace that dramatic change to AI era.
Talking about the entire like, you know, develop, test, life cycle piece. I mean, there's so much that is handed off, and there's a lot of questions out there now. Like, well, okay, computer scientists, like, what's the right skill? And again, I'll go back to where we started saying, like, the entry point is changing. I think we're still in a little bit of a figuring it out. I think universities and code camps are figuring that out. But is there? What are you seeing as there like a specific skill? Because if now that I can do that, my PRs are basically, hey, my PRs are automated. I've handed that off. I've got this, the member, your agentic member of the team. Is there like a specific skill you see in the, let's keep it with the software engineering,
Mhm.
product development space that is going to be absolutely critical?
Um, Let me start first with where the burning platform is actually for all of us in a system integration space, actually for all of us in software industry. If you're listening to the messages of all of those AI cloud vendors, they claim that all of those tools are so easy to use that everyone can use them. It's almost like a citizen development. It's low code, no code. It's like, hey, it's not much more complex to create a simple agent than it is to create Excel formulas. And nobody hires professional services to make Excel formulas, right? It just not exists anymore. So the market of making simple things is going to go out from professional software engineering discipline because you don't need to learn Python. You just do a couple of prompts and you get the basic structure it does 80% of the things. What happens in the top 20%? That's very much where I believe that AI for a long time is not going to be able to go there, which is how to make highly complex, highly structured, highly governed, compiled type of the systems. So everything that is interpreted and simple and team size, right, for small teams, yeah, that is going to go down the path of citizen development. Professional software engineering needs to be prepared to very much raise the bar dramatically. It's not, oh, I am adding 20 lines of Java code into something that I maintain. That's no longer a task that would be relevant for a human developer. But adding new features based on very complex, ambiguous requirements, and then putting in the non-functional requirements that, let's say, CIO and CISO puts on it, and finds the common good path through it with the right technology stack, the right architectures, that's a human job in IT. So from coders to actual engineers is that AI is going to take coding jobs, but it's not going to take software engineering jobs.
And that's the differentiator of like, I understand architecture, I understand the components like object oriented. It's more than just like the language itself or the context as well. And I think that's interesting because, back to where we were talking a few moments ago around like what the entry level skills. So today that I've talked well with a lot of folks about this diamond structure. Like, so normally you think of work like entry level and there can only be one CEO, right? But it's probably be more like this for just a short time, right? Like, okay, I need that software engineer, and you definitely need a pipeline of strong talent to grow into that. And maybe it's not a diamond, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's like a house shape or something to that effect.
It is a diamond, and that is what you are describing is a very complex conundrum of all professional services and advisory and consultancy and strategy industry. Yes, nobody is willing to pay for the most junior people, the bottom of the diamond. Then you obviously want to sell the talent that is in the middle of the seniority, and then you sprinkle the top tier specialists. But it is the conundrum. This is a
Mhm.
non-sustainable model because if you are shrinking the bottom of the diamond, you
Yep.
don't have the
You have no pipeline.
source. Correct. You are missing the pipeline to grow your seniors. And
Yeah.
that's a huge problem, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was we had an event here in Austin where I'm with some local high schoolers coming into the office, and I actually I my point of view is that these folks that are coming right out of high school right now are actually probably in some of the best spots because we'll have figured that out a few years from now, right? The university education systems, the code campers will have said like, what skill do I have to push down? So, rather than me having, back in the early 90s, I needed structured programming, object oriented, compilers, operating systems. It's like, that's all like one semester of make sure you understand the theory and philosophy, but here's what you really need to understand. And so again, with today is that more senior software engineer, that becomes your table stakes for everybody. And I'm not sure we know yet what the more senior role will be, but it's something about the merging. I mean, I don't know if you have a thought or opinion on that.
I read a couple of articles on that, but actually coming back to the current high school generation, I think that they're also facing the hardest identity crisis. If, let's say, there were jobs that were highly sought after in the past, becoming a lawyer, Now, being a good lawyer just means that you really read a lot of cases and you know the precedents and you know so
Yeah.
all of that AI can do better, right?
Hmm.
Being like economist, AI can do it better. So whole
Hmm.
bunch of the jobs I can go just down the list of even medical professionals, those that are mostly in research and so on, or in a biochem and so on. These are all the jobs. I mean, I have a kid that just started a college and he goes, I'm going to study something that AI cannot take away. So that you have the whole generation that is seeking jobs that they have a low probability that they're going to be displaced with AI. Like, you know, I don't know, kinesiology or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Yeah,
so yeah, someone like, I'm gonna go be a massage therapist
yeah,
because,
yeah,
it's, I mean,
exactly.
it's, although I think, what, at CES this year, the robots coming on stage, maybe we're not as far from that as that was might be a bridge too far for me in my lifetime, but we'll see.
Yeah. But coming back to what you said, it's what is a good, well formed system engineer? It's interesting to see how different colleges already shifted and rotated curriculums through, I would say, last decade. A good example, MIT, in whole 4 years of studies, when you are studying computer science, you never learn a language. It's not part of curriculum. It's for computer science degree, you're going to get that somehow, somewhere. We don't need to put it into the curriculum. It's no longer part of the core.
No, it's fascinating. And then I think there's a secondary as well, which is the data element of all this. Cause, traditionally, like, there's data, which would be your math and your economists and your, folks working over here, your statisticians, and the software engineers, et cetera, were over here. And in this world, you cannot separate the two. You have to have an understanding of your data flows, to effectively operate when agents are your partners, because you need to have that understanding, the knowledge, where it's coming from, where did it pass through? Is this, if you're questioning something, it's like, what's my level of trust here? Could this be a hallucination, or do I trust every flow underneath it? So the data piece is interesting too when you think about, like, the academic growth here.
Well, we are going to go through a repeat um, problem and resolution that we already did in the past. If you remember, a decade ago, we had the infrastructure people in the left corner, and we have the developers in the right corner. And developers did something, threw it over the wall, you know, like a broken pig, and then infrastructure people tried to keep it alive. That was unsustainable, and the whole DevOps movement, and that these two roles need to collapse into a single role. We saw the problem, we solved the problem. With the data, we are facing exactly the same thing. All of those data scientists that are now very highly paid jobs, especially doing AI, they can't code. You know, if you kill them, they can't code. At best, maybe they can get to some basic level of Python programming, but Python is Visual Basic level of coding these days, right? None of the data scientists is proficient in proper multi-threaded, parallelized, you know, binary compiling or anything like that. So data people and IT professionals that already are half infra, half developers these days, that has to merge as well. Are we going to talk about dev data ops or whatever it's going to be in the future? We have a DevSecOps and DevSec data ops and DevBees data arc ops, but all of these roles are forced to collapse together in the future.
No, and you are so spot on. I mean, for many years of my career, because I kind of bounced back and forth from, would be a CIO infrastructure categorized role to CTO software role. It's like, I saw this weird, you know, I saw this weird world where it was like they hated each other. It's like the software engineers, like, oh, all you guys do is, like, you just configure stuff, and they're like, you have no idea. All you do is just copy each other's code, right? And the two worlds are so close now. And, this data piece, again, it's like you cannot live in one world or the other. The big problems I see us solving it, in my seat here at IBM, are like, they require me to work with my partners over in the product development team. They require me to work with our chief data office, right? Like, there might be different organizations, but there's no air gap in the goals that we have and the outcomes we're trying to achieve.
Correct. That universalist as a role is becoming And probably that becomes one of the very important approaches. Historically, we were looking at lots of specialists. I would call them the I-shaped people, right? You go very deep in a very, very narrow domain. And then you put a leader on top of them, which I call a dash, very shallow across all of the different domains. And now we no longer can do that. Everyone needs to be a T-shaped personality. You have a very good breadth and at least one or multiple depth as well at the same time. And these people are rare, hard to find, and expensive to keep. So it's very interesting to me to see how are we going to go through this talent crisis that we are having right now, how to find the right universalists that can do all of the assigned tasks with AI tools, which means that typically the load of tasks on a typical person is about twice the size of the load that used to be without AI, let's say 5 to 10 years ago.
We're in total agreement. And I think, I think a good wrap up point for us here is, we've talked about the labor force changing. We started with the nature of partnerships. Now we're talking about the different disciplines. It's like, is there anything you think happening right now that is just incredibly overhyped?
I think not so much that it is overhyped, but the projection when things that are nascent are going to become mainstream, we are still overestimating and we are still kind of let's say there is a good example would be quantum. Quantum is 5 years away every single year in my 30 years career. It's always just 5 years and we are going to be ready there. So even with the current technologies, overhyped is AGI, of course, that, when is the era of general AI? Um, when are we going to get that next breakthrough is not going to be as fast as particularly people that are trying to monetize on the new waves are trying to position. We are in a really good, fast paced era, but it is not as crazy as lots of the vendors would like to show it. So, overhyped is the speed. I mean, we talked about quite some of the things that we see is happening, but it is not yet terrifyingly bad and terrifyingly fast. Right? So when I'm hearing how, things are getting out of control and now AI is going to take all of the jobs and control everything and we are just going to follow their prescriptions. Yeah, not in our lifetime, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Miha Kral, thank you so much for joining me on Transformers. This has been super fun conversation. I appreciate your insights.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
And thanks to all of you for joining today. We hope to see you again next time.